For 3 decades, Johnny Carson sat behind his desk on The Tonight Show and welcomed some of the most famous people in the world. Audiences saw him laughing, joking, and sharing warm moments with Hollywood legends, powerful musicians, and charismatic personalities. To viewers, it looked like everyone who sat beside him was his friend. They believed Carson enjoyed their company, admired them, and was honored to have them on his show. But when the cameras stopped recording and the studio lights dimmed, a very different story unfolded. According to the people who worked closest to him, Carson kept a mental list of people he never wanted to see again. These were guests he believed were cruel, manipulative, abusive, or deeply unpleasant. He never revealed this on television, but in private conversations during his later years. He confessed how difficult it was to sit beside certain celebrities without exposing what he really thought. A former producer who spent more than 10 years working on the show said that Carson had an incredible ability to maintain his calm. The public only saw the charming talk show host. But sometimes, during commercial breaks, Carson would turn to Ed McMahon and whisper that the person sitting beside him should never be allowed near a camera or even near a child. Those words did not come from jealousy, anger, or competitive feelings. They came from what he personally witnessed when the audience was not watching. Carson believed that several beloved Hollywood icons were nothing like the characters they played or the public images they created. Behind their polished smiles, they were heartless, aggressive, and sometimes frightening. One of the people who shocked Carson the most was Joan Crawford. When she appeared on The Tonight Show in 1970, millions saw an elegant woman who represented old Hollywood with grace and dignity. Her posture was perfect, her dress was flawless, and her tone was soft and controlled. But that charming behavior only existed when cameras were pointed at her. Hours before the show began, the staff experienced a very different version of her. Crawford sent a list of demands so detailed that the technical team had to adjust everything from the height of her chair to the temperature of the studio. She requested exactly 67 degrees, not a degree more or less. She demanded lighting changes so specific that the head of lighting kept her long memo in his files for decades, because he had never seen anything like it. What disturbed Carson more than her demanding nature was how she treated people she believed were beneath her. When a young assistant accidentally walked into her dressing room while bringing the water Crawford had asked for, Crawford verbally attacked her. Witnesses said she insulted the young woman so harshly that people in the hallway heard it and froze. The assistant ran away crying, and Crawford demanded she be fired. The staff refused, and the tension continued during the show. But as soon as the red recording light turned on, Crawford's face changed instantly. She smiled, laughed, nodded kindly, and acted as if she was the sweetest woman alive. During every commercial break, she sat stone-faced, silent, and cold, waiting for the light to signal her to begin acting again. Carson later said she reminded him of a statue, beautiful but empty. Years later, when Joan's daughter revealed in a book that her mother abused her, Carson said he believed every word because he had seen the real person, while Crawford was cold and controlling. Frank Sinatra represented a different kind of troubling behavior. On screen, he and Carson appeared friendly. But behind the curtain, Sinatra often acted like a man used to having power over others. He would arrive with a group of men who were not entertainers but looked more like bodyguards or enforcers. Their presence alone made staff uncomfortable. The moment someone gave Sinatra instructions about timing or stage placement, he would become hostile. One day, a floor manager gave Sinatra the usual 3-minute cue before going live. Sinatra grabbed the man by his tie and pulled him close, warning him not to tell him when he should go on stage. Carson watched this happen on a studio monitor and nearly canceled the segment. He allowed the show to continue only because Sinatra drew high viewer ratings. But afterward, Carson made sure Sinatra's appearances were limited. something he rarely did with any other guest. Then there was Orson Welles, a brilliant filmmaker and actor who believed that no rules applied to him. When Welles visited the show, people at home saw a charming storyteller with a big personality. But for the staff, working with him was exhausting. He would refuse every question the writers prepared, insisting that their work was beneath him. He would take over interviews, talk endlessly, and ignore Carson's signals to wrap up. On one occasion, he talked for so long that 2 other scheduled guests couldn't even appear on the show. He treated assistants like servants and sometimes tried to direct camera angles himself. Carson respected Welles' talent, but he disliked how ego had replaced humility. He once said that genius is no excuse for treating others badly. Bette Davis, another Hollywood legend, brought her own form of intensity to the show. She was sharp-tongued and dominating. If another guest received attention or applause, she would interrupt or overshadow them. She drank heavily backstage, and when the alcohol took effect, her comments became even more biting. Carson usually avoided direct confrontation. But when Davis insulted a cue card assistant and spoke to her in a demeaning way, Carson stepped in and calmly but firmly told Davis that everyone on his show was to be treated with respect. For a moment, Davis was stunned, but Carson maintained his stance. Then there was Mickey Rooney, once one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. By the time he appeared on The Tonight Show as an older man, he had developed a reputation for inappropriate behavior, especially toward young women. Staff members warned one another when he was scheduled to visit. Some female assistants asked not to work near him. Carson found this behavior unacceptable. During one appearance, Rooney seemed intoxicated and began telling a story that gradually turned inappropriate. Carson had to interrupt him to keep the broadcast suitable for viewers. After that episode, he confessed privately that Rooney's lack of boundaries made him extremely uncomfortable. Each of these guests reminded Carson that fame can hide the truth about a person. The public sees talent, beauty, charm, or humor, but behind the scenes, there can be arrogance, cruelty, addiction, or deep emotional emptiness. Carson, who valued professionalism, humility, and respect, could not understand how some stars treated others with such disregard as the years went by. Carson became more open about what he had experienced. He never embarrassed these people publicly, but in private conversations near the end of his life, he shared what he had seen with close friends. These memories weighed on him, not because he wanted revenge or attention, but because he had spent decades smiling beside people he believed were harming others. The world celebrated them as icons, while Carson silently watched how they behaved when they thought no one was watching. Carson's reflections reveal something powerful. Fame does not create character, it exposes it. Some rise to the occasion with kindness. Others use fame as a mask, hiding their darkest traits behind admiration and applause. Carson spent his career showing the world laughter, charm, and entertainment, but his private memories remind us that not every star shines from the inside. Some are bright on the screen and hollow in real life. Johnny was not someone who expected perfection or demanded that every guest act a certain way, but he believed strongly in basic respect and professionalism. A director who had worked with him for many years once said that Johnny was open-minded, humorous, and patient, but there were certain lines he did not tolerate being crossed. One of the guests who regularly crossed those lines was Mickey Rooney. Rooney had a long Hollywood career and was known for his big personality. But behind the scenes, he created uncomfortable situations. The director remembered how Rooney acted as if his behavior was harmless when others clearly felt uneasy. He often flirted, made comments that were inappropriate, and didn't seem to realize or care when people felt uncomfortable. One night, Rooney made repeated comments to a young actress who was also appearing on the show. The atmosphere on set became tense, and the actress looked embarrassed. After the show ended, Johnny personally apologized to her. The director recalled that he had never seen Johnny look that embarrassed over a guest's behavior. Johnny told her, "That's not how professionals act on my show, and it won't happen again." And Johnny meant it. After that, Rooney was invited far less often. And when he was, Johnny insisted that his appearances be taped in the daytime rather than in front of the evening live audience. This allowed more control if Rooney behaved inappropriately again. That situation was awkward, but at least predictable. The next guest who caused challenges did so for completely different reasons. Zsa Zsa Gabor was glamorous, charming, and very entertaining on camera. Audiences loved her, and Johnny did to wit least while the cameras were rolling. But behind the scenes, she was known for extreme demands and dramatic behavior that disrupted the entire production. She had a very specific list of requirements every time she appeared on the show. Her dressing room had to be exactly 74 degrees. She required fresh orchids and no carnations. She needed a bottle of Perrier water with exactly 3 ice cubes. She even insisted that the show pay to bring in her personal lighting technician. If any detail was not perfect, she refused to come out of her dressing room. This often caused tapings to be delayed and the entire schedule to shift. Other guests had to wait. Camera crews had to work late. The staff had to rush around trying to please her. One time, when the makeup department did not have her preferred brand of foundation, she got into a heated argument, shouting that someone needed to go to Beverly Hills right away to buy the correct product. Johnny himself had to step in and calm her, telling her kindly that she already looked beautiful and that they needed to move forward with the show. Even though she created chaos and frustration, she remained a frequent guest because when the camera was on, she was entertaining and audiences loved her. Johnny tolerated it, but it clearly exhausted him. Another guest who challenged Johnny in a completely different way was Shelley Winters. Winters was an extremely talented actress and had won 2 Oscars, and she had lived through decades of Hollywood history. She had many interesting stories to tell, which should have made her an ideal guest. But Winters had a fiery personality and would often take conversations in unexpected directions. She did not keep things light or humorous the way late-night interviews usually required. Instead, she would launch into long, intense speeches about politics, corruption, or personal experiences that were deeply emotional. Johnny, who was a master of guiding conversations smoothly, often had difficulty steering her back to lighter topics. It was as if she brought a storm with her every time. The staff even started removing anything heavy from the set when she came, worried she might throw something if she became upset. Yet her behavior came from passion, not malice. Johnny respected her sincerity, even if it made the show unpredictable. Over time, though, her appearances became less frequent because the tension she brought was simply too difficult to manage during a live broadcast. Another guest who caused discomfort for Johnny was actress Jane Russell. Russell had been a famous beauty and star from the 1940s and 1950s. At first, she seemed like a natural fit for the show. But in the early 1970s, she became known for expressing very harsh political opinions and making personal remarks about LGBTQ individuals. Johnny believed strongly that the show should remain neutral and welcoming to everyone, regardless of their identity. When Jane Russell refused to be worked on by a gay makeup artist and later refused to appear on the same episode as Rock Hudson, Johnny reached a breaking point. He did not tolerate discrimination toward the people who worked on his show. Though he rarely banned guests, he quietly ensured she was never booked again. It was one of the few times he drew a firm line based on his personal values. But the celebrity Johnny disliked the most was Jerry Lewis. For years, Lewis had been admired by the public as a comedic genius and a charitable figure for his work, raising money for muscular dystrophy research. On stage, he was funny, energetic, and sometimes emotional. But according to many people who worked behind the scenes, his kindness on camera did not match his behavior off camera. Lewis often treated crew members as if they were beneath him. He refused to learn people's names and dismissed them rudely. During one appearance, he even adjusted Johnny's tie without permission. Something everyone knew was a boundary Johnny didn't want crossed. One of the most shocking moments occurred when Lewis screamed at a camera operator for coughing quietly, demanding he be removed from the studio. The camera operator simply had allergies, but Lewis treated it as a personal insult. Johnny found it difficult to respect someone who publicly claimed to care so much about helping vulnerable children but privately treated everyday workers with cruelty. After one particularly bad appearance, Johnny said, "Never again," and Lewis was never invited back. These stories reveal something deeper about Johnny Carson and the Hollywood world he worked in. Johnny was not someone who went around criticizing others. He wanted to get along with everyone and make the show enjoyable. But his position gave him a unique understanding of people. Every major star of several decades sat on his stage, and he saw how they acted when the camera was on and when it was off. What mattered most to him was not how famous someone was or how talented they were, but how they treated the people around them, especially those who had less power. He believed that true character was shown in small moments, in how someone behaved when they didn't think it mattered. Over time, many of the behaviors Johnny quietly disliked became widely known through books, interviews, and stories from others in the industry. In many cases, the public eventually learned the same truths Johnny had already observed. But during his time, Hollywood was a place where studios protected big stars, even when their actions were harmful. There were no cell phone cameras, no viral videos, and no social media to expose the reality behind closed doors. A person could behave terribly in private and still be adored in public because the industry worked hard to maintain their image. Johnny, however, sat in a position where he saw the real versions of people. He saw the sincere ones, the troubled ones, the arrogant ones, and the ones who cared only about how they appeared. In the end, Johnny's quiet judgments were not about gossip or personal grudges. They showed what he valued: kindness, respect, professionalism, and authenticity. He believed that a person's real nature was not shown when they stood in the spotlight, but when they interacted with the people who helped create that spotlight for them. His experiences remind us that fame does not always equal character, and that behind every glamorous image there can be a much more complicated truth.